The scalpel felt steady in my hand as I worked to extract the third piece of shrapnel from Diego Martinez's leg. 16 years old, caught in the crossfire of someone else's war. His mother waited in the hallway, rosary beads clicking between her fingers. Whispering prayers I could hear through the surgical suite's door. "Almost done," I murmured, more to myself than to Dr. Ivanova across the table. 6 weeks at Nikolai Volov's private clinic had taught me not to ask how patients got injured. My job was to heal them, not judge the circumstances that brought them through our doors. The clinic occupied an unassuming building in South Boston, 3 blocks from the waterfront. To passers-by, it looked like any other community health center, but the security cameras mounted at every corner and the armed guards who screened each visitor told a different story. This was a place where people came when they couldn't risk questions at a real hospital. People like Diego, whose uncle worked for Nikolai's organization. People like me now, I supposed. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the delicate work of teasing metal from muscle tissue. The overhead lights hummed. Dr. Ivanova's breathing was steady and calm. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows. Everything felt routine, safe, contained. Then the first gunshot cracked through the evening air. My hands froze for only a heartbeat training overriding panic. Diego's vitals remained stable on the monitor. The shrapnel was almost out. I couldn't stop now. "Emma?" Dr. Ivanova's voice was tight. "We need to—" The second shot came closer. Then a third. Rapid fire that made the surgical instruments rattle on their tray. "I need 2 more minutes," I said, forcing my voice steady even as my pulse hammered against my throat. "He'll bleed out if I don't finish." Through the door, I heard shouting in Russian. Our security team returning fire. The distinctive sound of automatic weapons joined the chaos, a sound I'd only heard in movies until 3 months ago, when Nikolai had saved me from a mugging that I later learned wasn't random at all. Glass shattered in the waiting room. Someone screamed. My fingers didn't shake as I extracted the final piece of shrapnel. As I irrigated the wound, as I began suturing with practiced precision. 3 months ago, I would have been terrified. Now, some dark part of me had adapted to this world of violence, wrapped in expensive suits and quiet threats. "Done," I said, tying off the final stitch. "Get him to recovery. Ill." The surgical suite door exploded inward. I spun, scalpel still in hand, ready to defend my patient with the only weapon I had. But the man in the doorway wasn't an attacker. Nikolai Vulov stumbled across the threshold, one hand pressed to his side, his white dress shirt soaked crimson from collar to waist. Blood dripped onto my sterile floor in heavy drops that seemed impossibly loud against the distant gunfire. Our eyes met across the operating table. His face was sheet pale except for a spray of blood across his left cheek. Not his own, I assessed with clinical detachment. His dark eyes, usually so controlled and calculating, were wild with something I'd never seen in them before. Fear. Not for himself. For me. "Get out!" he rasped, his Russian accent thicker than usual, roughened by pain or urgency. "Emma, they're coming for you." "Providence knows." He swayed, catching himself against the doorframe. "They know you matter to me." Behind him, the sounds of battle intensified, men shouting. More gunfire. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with the antiseptic scent of my surgical suite. Dr. Ivanova was already moving, rolling a second gurney into position. Her hands were steady even though her eyes betrayed her terror. We've done this before, treated Nikolai's injured men, patched up violence we couldn't report. But never like this. Never with the danger so immediate, so personal. Never with Nikolai himself bleeding in my doorway while telling me I was the target. "I'm not leaving Diego," I said, moving toward Nikolai even as my brain screamed at me to run. "And I'm not letting you bleed out while standing there being noble. Get on the gurney." Now something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or that dangerous warmth I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. The warmth that made me think of him late at night when I should have been thinking of escape routes instead. He took one step toward me, then another. Then his legs gave out, and I was catching him, his weight heavy against me, his blood warm and wet, soaking through my scrubs. You stubborn woman, he whispered against my hair, his breath ragged. You'll get yourself killed. I helped him onto the gurney, my hands already assessing his wound with practiced efficiency. The bullet had hit low on his left side, possibly nicking his spleen. He needed surgery. He needed a hospital. What he had was me, elbowed deep in a crisis with bullets still flying outside. Then we'll die together, I heard myself say, reaching for fresh gloves. Because I'm not leaving you either. Outside, someone screamed my name. The surgical suite window exploded inward in a shower of glass, and I knew with absolute certainty that the careful distance I'd maintained from Nikolai Volov's world had just shattered along with it. Dr. Ivanova, I need you on Diego, I commanded, my voice steadier than my hands as I cut away Nikolai's blood-soaked shirt. Keep him stable. I'll handle this. Emma, you cannot work on both, she started. I can and I will. I didn't look up from Nikolai's wound, my fingers already probing the entry point. He came here to warn me. I'm not letting him die for it. Nikolai's hands shot up, catching my wrist with surprising strength for a man losing blood. The pain medication, he said through gritted teeth. Don't. You need it. This is going to... No. His dark eyes locked onto mine, fever-bright and unyielding. I need to stay alert, to protect you if they breach the suite. The reality of our situation crystallized like ice in my veins. We were under siege. Nikolai's security team was outnumbered or outgunned or both, and he was preparing to defend me while I operated on him. You're insane, I whispered, but my hands were already moving, irrigating the wound with saline to assess the damage. About you? Yes. I ignored the way those words made my heart stutter, focusing instead on the torn tissue beneath my gloved fingers. The bullet had entered just below his ribs, tunneling through muscle but miraculously, missing major organs. An inch higher, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Or no conversation at all. Behind me, Diego whimpered as Dr. Ivanova checked his vitals. His mother's prayers had turned to sobs somewhere in the building. More gunfire erupted, closer now. The lights flickered. I worked methodically, clamping bleeders, debriding damaged tissue, my entire world narrowing to the wound beneath my hands, and the man who watched me with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. They knew I'd be here tonight, Nikolai said quietly as I sutured the deepest layer. My schedule isn't public, Emma, someone told them. A traitor. The word hung unspoken between us. Someone in your inner circle, I said. Yes. His jaw tightened. Someone who knew this clinic matters to me. That you matter to me. My hands paused for only a fraction of a second before continuing their work. We'd never discussed what existed between us. The tension that crackled every time he visited the clinic. The way his eyes followed me, the careful distance I maintained because getting close to Nikolai Vulov meant accepting his world of violence. That distance had just been obliterated by bullets and blood. How many attackers? I asked, instead of addressing his confession. At least 10. Providence came prepared. He winced as I placed another suture. Marcus Salvatore wants to send a message. The gunfire outside suddenly stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the chaos, heavy with implications I didn't want to consider. Nikolai's hand found his waistband, where I knew he kept a gun. Emma, when they come through that door, they're not coming. The voice was Anton's, Nikolai's second in command, shouting from somewhere in the building. Boss, we've held them off. They're retreating. Relief crashed through me so hard I had to grip the gurney's edge to stay steady. Casualties? Nikolai called back, his voice strong despite the blood loss. The pause before Anton answered told me everything. 2 dead. 8 wounded. And boss. Another pause, this one laced with fury. They left a message. I tied off the final suture, covered the wound with sterile gauze, and helped Nikolai sit up slowly. His color was better now. The bleeding stopped. He'd be sore for weeks, but he'd live. We found Anton in what remained of the clinic's waiting room. Glass crunched beneath our feet. Bullet holes pocked the walls. So much blood stained the linoleum in spreading pools. but it was the message spray-painted across the wall in crimson that stopped my breath. The nurse is next. My name was written underneath in crude block letters, Emma Sullivan. I stared at the words. My brain struggling to process the threat made so horrifyingly explicit. They knew my name. They'd come here specifically to kill Nikolai and terrify me. Or worse, to take me. No. Nikolai's voice was soft but carried absolute authority. Absolutely not. I turned to find him standing behind me, one hand pressed to his bandaged side. His face a mask of cold fury that made him look every inch the dangerous man he was. "You're not staying here tonight," he continued, his eyes never leaving the message on the wall. "You're not going back to your apartment. You're coming home with me, Emma, to my estate, where I can protect you properly. Nikolai, I can't just... non-negotiable." He finally looked at me, and the fear I'd seen in his eyes earlier had transformed into something harder, darker, something that looked like possession. "Marcus Salvatore just declared war, and he made you the battlefield. I won't leave you exposed." Anton stepped forward, his expression grim. "He's right, Miss Sullivan. Providence doesn't make empty threats. If they say you're next, they mean it." I looked around at the destruction, at the blood of men who'd died defending this place, and my name written in paint that looked too much like the blood on my scrubs. Nikolai's fingers closed around my wrist, blood slicked and trembling despite his attempt at control. "Please," he said, and that single word held more vulnerability than I'd ever heard from him. "Let me keep you safe, Emma, even if you hate me for it tomorrow. I should have refused, should have insisted on my independence, my right to make my own choices. Instead, I heard myself whisper, 'Okay.'" His grip tightened, relief flooding his features. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had finally called the police. We had minutes, maybe, before questions I couldn't answer started being asked. "Anton, get her things," Nikolai ordered. "We leave now." As they led me toward the rear exit, past the wounded men being treated by Dr. Ivanova's remaining staff, past the bodies covered with white sheets, I glanced back one final time at my name on the wall. The message was clear. I'd stopped being just Nikolai Vorlov's doctor the moment I'd saved his life tonight. Now I was his weakness, and in his world, weaknesses got people killed. The Rolls-Royce glided through Boston's streets like a predator, silent and powerful. I sat in the back beside Nikolai, still wearing blood-spattered scrubs. My hands scrubbed clean but still feeling sticky with the memory of violence. Nikolai hadn't spoken since we left the clinic. He stared out the window, one hand pressed to his bandaged side, his jaw tight with pain he refused to acknowledge. 2 SUVs flanked us, front and rear filled with armed men whose eyes never stopped scanning for threats. I was drowning in the reality of what my life had become in the span of 2 hours. When we pulled up to the historic Beacon Hill townhouse, I recognized it immediately. I'd been here once before, 3 months ago, when Nikolai had insisted on personally thanking me for treating one of his men. The visit had lasted exactly 20 minutes, long enough for a tour of his art collection, and a warning from my instincts to maintain professional distance. That distance felt laughable now. Anton opened my door, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Sullivan, welcome. Mrs. Petrov has prepared the guest wing for you." The guest wing. As if I were a visitor instead of a refugee. Inside, the townhouse was exactly as I remembered. Soaring ceilings. Museum-quality artwork, the kind of quiet luxury that whispered old money and older secrets. Mrs. Petrov, the housekeeper, appeared immediately, her steel-grey hair pulled into its customary severe bun. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of my blood-stained clothing. "Draw Miss Sullivan a bath," Nikolai instructed, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "And bring her something to eat. She hasn't had dinner." "I can take care of myself," I said, the first words I'd spoken since leaving the clinic. His eyes cut to me, dark and unreadable. "Humor me, Mrs." Petrov led me up a private staircase to what she called the guest wing, an entire floor that consisted of a master bedroom larger than my apartment, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and a sitting room lined with books. Everything was decorated in soft greys and blues, elegant but impersonal. Like a very expensive hotel room, or a very comfortable prison. "Mr. Vulov asks that you rest," Mrs. Petrov said, setting fresh towels on the marble vanity. "He will speak with you in the morning about security arrangements." "Security arrangements," I laughed. The sound bitter even to my own ears. "You mean the guards I saw stationed at the bottom of the staircase?" Her expression didn't change. "For your protection, Miss Sullivan." After she left, I stood in the center of the bedroom, fury and exhaustion warring inside me. I'd agreed to come here, yes, but the reality of it, the locked doors I'd noticed on the way up, the guards, the careful phrasing that made captivity sound like hospitality, made my skin crawl. I'd escaped poverty and my father's early death to build a life on my own terms. I'd worked double shifts and survived on instant ramen to put myself through nursing school. I'd chosen independence over every comfortable compromise that came my way, and now I was trapped in a gilded cage by a man who thought protection and possession were the same thing. The bath was hot enough to sting. I scrubbed Diego's blood from beneath my fingernails, Nikolai's blood from my forearms, the blood of men whose names I didn't know from my hands. The water turned pink, then red, then finally clear as I drained and refilled it twice. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a silk robe I hadn't chosen, I found a tray of food, waiting roasted chicken, vegetables, bread still warm from the oven. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, my mind replaying the attack over and over. They knew my name. They'd come for Nikolai, but threatened me. And he'd walked into an ambush, already wounded, to warn me. Sleep was impossible. At 3 a.m. I gave up trying and padded downstairs in bare feet, following the glow of light spilling from beneath a door I remembered as Nikolai's study. I should have gone back to my room, should have maintained what little boundary remained between us. Instead, I knocked softly and pushed the door open. Nikolai sat behind a massive mahogany desk, surrounded by surveillance photos and tactical maps. His shirt was unbuttoned, revealing the white bandage stark against his tanned skin. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. An empty glass and a half-full bottle of whiskey sat at his elbow. He looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across his features before settling into something softer. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you. You were shot 6 hours ago. I've had worse." His eyes tracked my movement as I crossed to the leather chair opposite his desk and sat down. "Can't sleep? Can't stop seeing my name on that wall." I pulled the robe tighter. "Can't stop thinking about how they knew exactly where to find you. About the traitor in your organization who sold you out." Nikolai's jaw tightened. "Anton is investigating. By morning we'll know who. And then what? You'll kill them." He didn't flinch from my directness. Yes. The simple honesty should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a dark satisfaction that shamed me. Someone had put my name on a hit list. Some part of me wanted them punished for it. God, what was this world doing to me? "Why did you come to the clinic?" I asked quietly, voicing the question that had haunted me since he'd stumbled through that door. "You could have sent your men to evacuate me. You could have called. Instead, you walked into an ambush while already wounded from—" I gestured at his side. "From whatever happened before." Nikolai stood slowly, moving around the desk with careful precision. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "Because if you died thinking I'd abandoned you," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper, something that made my breath catch, I couldn't live with that. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along my cheek with devastating gentleness. "Because you matter to me, Emma Sullivan. More than territory, more than pride, more than the empire I've spent my life building." His thumb traced my lower lip. "And Marcus Salvatore knows it. That's why he came for you. That's why this war won't end until one of us is dead. I should have pulled away. Should have told him that mattering to a man like him was a death sentence. Instead, I turned my face into his palm, my eyes closing against the tears I refused to shed. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "So am I," his forehead touched mine. "So am I." Morning arrived with weak November sunlight filtering through the guest wing windows. I'd managed perhaps 2 hours of sleep after returning from Nikolai's study, my dreams filled with spray-painted threats and the weight of his confession. "You matter to me, Emma Sullivan." A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Mrs. Petrov entered with fresh clothes, jeans and a cashmere sweater in exactly my size, tags already removed. "Mr. Volov requests your presence at breakfast," she said, her tone suggesting refusal wasn't an option. "Anton will be joining you both." I dressed slowly, noting the armed guard still stationed at the bottom of the private staircase. Not prisoners, Nikolai had said. But the locked exits and constant surveillance told a different story. The breakfast room overlooked a private courtyard garden, somehow lush despite the season. Nikolai sat at the head of a long table, Anton to his right. Both men stood when I entered, a courtesy that felt absurd given the circumstances. "How's your side?" I asked Nikolai, taking the seat across from Anton. "Manageable." He poured coffee into my cup with his left hand. His right pressed subtly against his bandaged ribs. "You should eat. We have much to discuss, and none of it will improve your appetite." Anton opened a leather portfolio, spreading photographs across the table with methodical precision. My stomach dropped as I recognized myself in every single one. Me leaving the clinic 3 weeks ago. Me at the grocery store buying wine and pasta. Me in my apartment window, backlit, and unaware I was being watched. Me jogging through Boston Common on a Sunday morning. Dozens of photos taken over weeks, maybe months. A surveillance operation so thorough it made my skin crawl. "Providence has been watching you since August," Anton said, his voice professionally detached. "Shortly after Mr. Volov pulled you from that mugging. The mugging." My voice came out flat, already knowing what he'd say next. Nikolai's jaw tightened. Wasn't random. It was a test. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. A test for what? To see if you mattered to me. Nikolai's dark eyes met mine across the table, guilt and fury warring in their depths. Marcus wanted to know if the woman I'd saved was just another civilian or something more. My reaction gave him his answer. I remembered that night, 3 months ago, walking home from a late shift. The 2 men who'd grabbed me in the alley, demanding my purse and phone. Then Nikolai, appearing from nowhere, moving with lethal efficiency that left both attackers on the ground. The way he'd touched my face after, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. "You knew," I said slowly, realization crystallizing like ice. "Even then, you knew it wasn't random," I suspected. He didn't look away, didn't soften the truth. "Marcus Salvatore has been testing my weaknesses for years. When he staged that mugging and I responded personally instead of sending my men, I confirmed his suspicion that I was a weakness, that you were important." Anton cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to the photographs. "Marcus Salvatore is not a rational actor, Miss Sullivan. He's driven by vendetta, not strategy." He slid a new photo across the table, a man in his 40s with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. Handsome in a polished way that felt dangerous, like a knife wrapped in silk. "Marcus was my father's protege," Nikolai said quietly. "Brilliant, ambitious, loyal. My father groomed him to take over the organization one day. But you inherited instead," I finished. "I was 16 when my parents were murdered by a rival family. The organization needed leadership immediately, and blood trumped everything else." Nikolai's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. Marcus was 25, experienced, respected. He expected the position. Instead, he got passed over for a grieving teenager. "That was 18 years ago," I said. "He's held a grudge for 18 years? "Not just a grudge." Anton's expression darkened. "An obsession. He broke away 5 years ago to form Providence, built his own empire in Rhode Island. But it's never been about territory for Marcus. It's about proving he should have been chosen, that he's superior to Nikolai in every way. And now he thinks taking me proves that superiority. The clinical detachment I'd been maintaining cracked. I'm just a trophy in your war with each other. No." Nikolai's hands slammed on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "You're not a trophy, Emma. You're—" He stopped himself, jaw working as he fought for control. You're the first thing I've cared about in years that Marcus can actually touch. My organization, my territory, my reputation, those are abstractions. But you're real, vulnerable, human. Anton slid one final photograph across the table. It was me yesterday morning, unlocking my apartment door. Coffee in one hand, keys in the other, completely unaware of the camera. Written across the bottom in red ink that looked too much like blood were 2 words. Soon, Angel. The pet name made bile rise in my throat. He's been planning this for weeks, Anton said. The clinic attack was meant to flush you into the open, to separate you from Mr. Vorlov's protection. When that failed, he left this at your apartment door this morning. My hands shook as I set the photo down. You didn't tell me any of this. You knew I was being watched, that I was in danger, and you said nothing. No. Nikolai's voice was rough. I didn't. Why? The question came out as a demand. He met my eyes, and the raw honesty in his expression stole my breath. Because I was selfish, Emma. Because I wanted you in my life more than I wanted you safe from it. He leaned forward, his intensity almost physical. I told myself I was protecting you by keeping you ignorant. That if you didn't know about Marcus's surveillance, you'd go about your life normally and he'd lose interest. But he didn't lose interest. No. He became obsessed. Nikolai's hand clenched into a fist on the table. Every time I visited the clinic, every conversation we had, every moment I let myself look at you like you were more than just my doctor, I was painting a target on your back. And I did it anyway. The confession hung between us, brutal in its honesty. Anton gathered the photographs, tucking them back into his portfolio. We've tripled security around the estate. No one enters without biometric clearance. The windows are bulletproof, the doors reinforced steel. Miss Sullivan, you're as safe here as anywhere in Boston. Except I can't leave, I said quietly. Not until Marcus is neutralized, Anton confirmed. I looked at Nikolai, at the guilt and determination warring in his dark eyes. How long? I asked. His answer was a knife to the chest. However long it takes. By day 3, the gilded cage was suffocating me. I woke to find breakfast already prepared, clothes already selected. My entire day planned around Nikolai's security protocols. Mrs. Petrov delivered my meals with clockwork precision. Guards rotated shifts outside my door with military efficiency. The guest wing had everything I could possibly need: books, a television, even a small desk with a laptop. Everything except freedom. I found Nikolai in his study after lunch, reviewing reports with Anton. Both men looked up when I entered without knocking. My patience for courtesy exhausted. I'm going back to work, I announced. Today. Nikolai's expression didn't change. No, you're not. That wasn't a request. I crossed my arms. I have patients who need me. Dr. Ivanova is overwhelmed with the injured from the attack. I'm a trauma nurse sitting idle while people suffer. Dr. Ivanova has brought in additional staff from our Providence clinic. He set down his pen with careful precision. Your patients are being cared for by strangers who don't know their histories. Their fears, I stopped, fighting the anger rising in my chest. Nikolai, I didn't go to nursing school to hide in a mansion while others do my job. You're not hiding. His voice remained maddeningly calm. You're staying alive. Is there a difference? I demanded. Because from where I'm standing, this feels exactly like hiding. Worse, it feels like giving Marcus Salvatore exactly what he wants. He threatened me, so I disappeared. He wins. Anton cleared his throat. Miss Sullivan, perhaps if we explain the tactical situation. I understand the tactical situation perfectly, Anton. I didn't take my eyes off Nikolai. What I don't understand is why my medical oath apparently includes a suicide pact, according to you. Something flashed in. Nikolai's eyes, anger, finally breaking through his control. Your medical oath doesn't require martyrdom. And your protection doesn't require imprisonment. You're not imprisoned. Really? I turned toward the door. Then I'll just leave. I made it halfway down the hallway before Nikolai's voice stopped me. Emma, don't. I tried the staircase door. Locked. The elevator biometric scanner I couldn't access. Even the door to the main house required a code I didn't have. The truth settled over me like a weight. I was trapped. When I turned back, Nikolai stood in the hallway, his expression carefully neutral except for the tension in his jaw. "You said I wasn't a prisoner," I said, my voice cold. "You're not, but you didn't move to unlock the doors. You're protected. With locks? With guards? With you controlling every aspect of my life?" The frustration that had been building for 3 days finally exploded. "You don't get to decide what risks I take, Nikolai. You don't get to lock me away like some valuable possession you're afraid of losing. You think I want this?" His control cracked, voice rising. "You think I enjoy keeping you caged? I hate it, Emma. I hate seeing you look at me like I'm your jailer instead of—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Instead of what?" I challenged. "Instead of someone trying desperately to keep you alive." The raw emotion in his voice caught me off guard. "Marcus Salvatore doesn't make idle threats. He will come for you. He will hurt you, take you, use you to destroy me. And I can't." His hand raked through his hair. "I can't lose you. Not to him. Not to anyone. So you'd rather lose me to resentment?" I asked quietly. "To the anger that builds every time I try a door and find it locked? Every time I'm reminded that my choices don't matter anymore?" He stared at me, something broken in his eyes. "What do you want, Emma? Tell me how to keep you safe and free, because I don't know how to do both." The desperation in his voice softened my fury. I took a breath, thinking clinically through the problem the way I would a medical crisis. "Compromise," I said finally. "I can't go to the clinic. I understand that. But I can still help. Telemedicine. Set up a secure connection from here. I can consult on cases, review treatment plans, talk patients through recovery. I maintain my purpose, my skills. You maintain your security." Nikolai considered this, his strategic mind clearly weighing risks. Video calls only. No location data. Encrypted connections. And I get a code for these doors. I pointed at the locked staircase. "I'm not locked in my wing like Rapunzel. If I want to use your library or sit in the courtyard, I can. With guards present. Discreet guards." I held his gaze. "I need to feel like a person, Nikolai. Not a precious object to be kept under glass." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried. His hand came up, hesitating inches from my face before finally touching my cheek. "You are precious," he said softly. "But you're right. You're also a person. With agency and purpose and strength I have no right to cage." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "I'm sorry. For the locks. For making you feel imprisoned. I'm not good at this. At caring for someone without trying to control everything around them." The honesty disarmed me more effectively than any command could have. "Then learn," I whispered. "Because I can't live like this. And I won't. I'll have Anton set up the telemedicine station today." He let his hand fall away. "And I'll give you full access to the house. Just please, don't leave the estate grounds without telling me first." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. That night I awoke to find Nikolai standing in my doorway, backlit by the hallway light. I sat up, heart racing, reaching instinctively for the lamp. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion or emotion. I couldn't tell which. "For the locks. For all of it." "But Emma," he paused, one hand gripping the doorframe like he needed support. "I've lost everyone I've ever cared about to this world. My parents, my mentor, friends who became casualties of wars I started. I can't lose you too. I can't watch Marcus take another person from me." The vulnerability in his confession made my chest ache. "So you'd rather push me away yourself?" I asked gently. "No." He met my eyes across the darkened room. "God help me, no. I'd rather figure out how to keep you close without destroying what makes you who you are." I should have sent him away. Should have maintained boundaries. Instead, I heard myself say, "Then come here." He crossed the threshold slowly, uncertain. I pulled back the covers an invitation. Nikolai settled beside me, careful not to jostle his injured side, and I fit myself against him, his arm around my shoulders, my head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. "We'll figure it out," I whispered into the darkness. Together, his lips pressed against my hair. Together, I found Nikolai in his private library that evening, staring into the fireplace with a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves surrounded us, filled with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. The fire cast dancing shadows across his face. "You came," he said, without turning. "You asked." I settled into the chair opposite his. "What did you want to talk about?" He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. "Then Marcus Salvatore wasn't just my father's protégé. He was family." I stayed silent, sensing he needed to tell this story his way. "My father found Marcus at 19, orphaned, brilliant, hungry. He groomed him to inherit the organization. By the time I was 8, Marcus had become the older brother I never had." Nikolai's jaw tightened. "I worshipped him." The firelight made his eyes look darker, haunted. "When my parents were murdered, I was 16. Marcus was 25 at the height of his power. Everyone expected him to take over. He took a slow sip of whiskey, but blood inheritance trumped everything. I became head of the family that night, and Marcus watched everything he'd worked for slip away." "He resented you," I said softly. "Not immediately. He hid it well for years, helped me learn the business, guided me." Nikolai's knuckles whitened around the glass. "But resentment is like poison. By the time I was 22, I knew he was planning to take what he believed should have been his. What did you do?" His eyes finally met mine, and the darkness there made my breath catch. I gave him a choice: leave Boston and build his own empire, or die. He chose Providence. We've been in Cold War ever since. He leaned forward. "Until 3 months ago, when I decided to go legitimate, to leave the violence behind. And Marcus saw it as weakness. He saw it as proof that I was never fit to lead." Nikolai set down his glass with deliberate care. "That without the monster, I'm nothing. It's taking you, hurting you. That's how he proves it. By forcing me to choose between protecting you and staying the man I'm trying to become." The vulnerability in his confession was devastating. I rose from my chair and knelt in front of him, taking his scarred hands in mine. "What if you're not the monster, Nikolai?" I asked quietly. "What if you're just a man who inherited violence and is trying to do better?" His laugh was broken. "Then why does the thought of losing you make me want to burn Providence to the ground? Why do I lie awake planning exactly how I'd make Marcus suffer if he touched you? Because you're human. Because fear makes us want to lash out." I held his gaze. "But Marcus doesn't understand that you've already made your choice. You chose to change. You chose to be better. And that terrifies him more than any violence ever could." Tears shone in his dark eyes, the first time I'd seen him this close to breaking. "What if keeping you safe requires me to become the monster again?" he whispered. I reached up, cupping his face in my hands. "Then we find another way. Together." I pressed my forehead to his, because I refuse to believe violence is the only answer. And I refuse to let Marcus Salvatore dictate who you become. His arms came around me, pulling me against him with desperate strength. We stayed like that in front of the fire, tangled together, while something fragile and precious took root between us. "I'm terrified of losing you," he admitted against my hair. "I'm terrified of watching you lose yourself to save me." I pulled back to meet his eyes. "So we protect each other. Not just from Marcus, but from the darkness." His kiss was soft, tentative, tasting of whiskey and desperation and hope. When we broke apart, I saw something new in his expression, not just desire or possession, but genuine partnership. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "Anton and I brief you on our plans for Marcus. No more secrets. You deserve to know everything." I nodded, settling into his lap carefully to avoid his injured side. His arms tightened around me, and we watched the fire burn low together. Outside, November wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the darkness, Marcus Salvatore was planning his next move. But here, in the firelight, we built something stronger than fear. something that felt dangerously like love. And for the first time since the clinic attack, I didn't feel like a prisoner in Nikolai's world. I felt like his partner in finding a way out of it. The telemedicine call with Dr. Ivanova was routine reviewing post-op care for a patient with a repaired GSW when my secondary line lit up with an emergency code. "Emma." The voice was Anton's, tight with pain. "I need—" Gunfire crackled through the connection. Christ. They found the safe house. My blood turned to ice. "Anton, where are you?" "Dorchester. East 4th Street. His breathing was labored. Wet. Took one to the chest. Providence has the building surrounded." "I can't." More gunfire. Glass shattering. "I can't get out." I was already moving, racing down the hallway toward Nikolai's study. I burst through the door without knocking. "Anton's hit," I said, breathless. "Providence has him pinned in Dorchester." Chest wound. Nikolai was on his feet instantly, his phone already at his ear, barking orders in rapid Russian. His eyes met mine, dark with calculation and something else. Reluctance. "You're thinking of going after him," I said. "I'm thinking of sending a team. He mentored you after your parents died. He's family." I grabbed my medical bag from where I'd left it after the last consultation. "And he needs a trauma surgeon, not just extraction." "I'm going, Emma." "Absolutely not. He'll die if you don't get someone with medical training to him in the next 20 minutes. I held his gaze, unwavering. "You know I'm right." The internal war played across his face. Duty versus protection. Anton's life versus mine. Finally, he nodded once. Sharp. "We go together. Full tactical team. You do exactly what I say when I say it." The SUV ride to Dorchester took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Nikolai sat beside me in body armor he'd insisted I wear over my sweater, his hand gripping mine with bruising intensity. When we breached, he said quietly, "You stay behind me until I clear the room. Then you work fast. We'll have maybe 10 minutes before Providence regroups." The safe house was a nondescript triple-decker, squeezed between abandoned buildings. Bullet holes pocked the facade. 2 of Nikolai's security team were already exchanging fire with shooters positioned across the street. "Go!" Nikolai commanded. What followed was controlled chaos. Nikolai's men moved with military precision, laying down suppressive fire while 3 of us Nikolai, a guard named Victor, and me sprinted for the entrance. The door had been shot off its hinges. We moved through darkness, weapons up, until we found Anton on the kitchen floor. He was sheet pale, one hand pressed to his chest, blood pooling beneath him. "About time," he rasped, managing a weak smile when he saw me. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands already assessing the wound. Entry point below the left clavicle, no exit wound. The bullet was still in there, possibly in his lung. His breathing was rapid and shallow tension, pneumothorax. "I need light," I said, my voice steady despite the gunfire still echoing outside. Nikolai positioned himself by the window, returning fire while Victor held a flashlight over Anton's chest. I worked quickly, using a scalpel from my bag to make an incision between his ribs. Anton gritted his teeth but didn't cry out. "You're doing great," I murmured, inserting a chest tube I'd fashioned from surgical tubing. Air hissed out as the pressure released. Anton's breathing immediately eased. "Told you she was extraordinary," Anton said to Nikolai, his voice stronger already. "Shut up and let me work," but I was smiling despite everything. I packed the wound, started an IV line with the saline I'd brought, and had Anton stabilized within 8 minutes. Nikolai's team, called the All-Clear Providence, had retreated when reinforcements arrived. The extraction back to the estate was tense but uneventful. Anton was transferred to a proper surgical suite Nikolai maintained in the townhouse's basement, where a surgeon on his payroll completed the bullet removal. I scrubbed Anton's blood from my hands in the surgical sink, my body finally registering the adrenaline crash. Nikolai appeared in the doorway, still in tactical gear, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You ran toward danger to save him," he said quietly, "just like in that alley months ago. This world hasn't corrupted you, Emma." I turned off the water, meeting his eyes in the mirror's reflection. "Maybe it has," I admitted. The words tasted like truth and ash, because I'm not horrified by what happened tonight. I'm not shaking or traumatized or questioning my choices. I turned to face him fully. I'm angry, Nikolai. I want Marcus Salvatore stopped, whatever it takes. Something fierce and possessive flared in his eyes. He crossed to me in 3 strides, framing my face with hands that still smelled of gunpowder. Whatever it takes, he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. Together, the kiss was hard, desperate, tasting of violence and survival and the darkness we were both sinking into. And I didn't pull away. Anton was sleeping, stable, the bullet removed and chest tube draining properly. Dr. Ivanova had taken over his care, shooing me out of the medical suite with orders to rest. Rest felt impossible. I was wired, adrenaline still singing through my veins hours after the rescue. I found Nikolai in his study, standing at the window overlooking the darkened courtyard. A fresh shirt replacing the blood-stained tactical gear. He turned when I entered, his expression unreadable in the low lamplight. "You should eat something," he said. Mrs. Petrov left food in the kitchen. I'm not hungry. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it. "Ask me." His brow furrowed. "Ask you what?" "What you've been avoiding asking since I moved into this house." I pushed off the door, crossing to stand in front of him. "Do I want this? You, your world, the danger and violence and complexity. Ask me, Nikolai. No more assumptions. No more claiming me through circumstance." He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. "Do you want this?" His voice was rough, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely heard. "Me? Knowing what I am and what I've done? Knowing that loving me means living with the threat of men like Marcus? That our children would inherit my sins along with my name? My heart stuttered at loving me, at our children, futures he was imagining despite everything. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can live with the violence long term. I don't know if legitimizing your empire will be enough to keep us safe. I don't know if what we have can survive in daylight." Pain flickered across his features. "But I know this," I continued, stepping closer until we were almost touching. "I'm terrified of losing you. More terrified of never knowing what we could be together." And tonight, when I was working on Anton with bullets flying, my voice cracked. I wasn't thinking about escape or safety. I was thinking that if Marcus kills you, I'll never forgive myself for all the time I wasted being afraid. His hands came up to frame my face, thumbs tracing my cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "Emma," I silenced him with a kiss, pouring weeks of fear and want and desperate longing into it. His response was immediate, one hand sliding into my hair while the other wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him. "Yes," I whispered against his lips. "I want this. You, whatever it costs." Something broke in him then. The careful control he always maintained shattered, and suddenly we were moving my back against the desk, his body covering mine, hands urgent and claiming. His mouth traced fire down my throat while my fingers worked the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel skin to confirm he was real and alive and mine. "Emma," my name was a prayer and a warning. "If we do this, I won't let you go. Ever. Then don't." I pulled him back to me, and the world narrowed to just us, the slide of skin, the tangle of limbs, the desperate affirmation that we were both alive despite everything trying to kill us. Later, tangled together on the leather couch in his study, my head on his chest and his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, reality crept back in. "Marcus will make his final move soon," Nikolai said quietly, his voice rumbling beneath my ear. "Within 48 hours. Anton's attack was a distraction. He's planning something bigger." I pressed closer, suddenly cold despite the warmth of Nikolai's body. "How do you know?" "Because it's what I would do." His arms tightened around me. "Divide my attention, force me to protect multiple fronts, then strike where I'm weakest." "Here," I realized. "He'll come for me here. He'll try." Steel entered Nikolai's voice. "But I have a plan. A way to end this that doesn't require waiting for him to attack." I lifted my head to look at him. "What kind of plan?" His eyes were dark, determined, and touched with something that looked like regret. Marcus sent word through back channels. He wants a parley. Neutral ground, tomorrow night. He claims he's willing to negotiate terms. It's a trap, obviously. A grim smile touched his lips, but it's also an opportunity. To end this without more bloodshed. To eliminate the threat permanently. Fear clawed at my throat. You're going to kill him. I'm going to do whatever is necessary to ensure you're safe. He cupped my face, forcing me to hold his gaze. I need you to trust me, Emma, and I need you to stay here, protected, while I handle this. Every instinct screamed against letting him walk into danger alone. We're partners now, I said firmly. You don't get to sideline me for my own protection anymore. This isn't sidelining, it's strategy. His thumb traced my lower lip. Marcus wants you as leverage. I won't give him that. I saw the logic even as I hated it. 48 hours, I whispered. And then this is over? Then we start building the life we both want. He kissed me softly, a promise sealed in touch. Together. No more running, no more hiding. Just us. I kissed him back, tasting hope and desperation in equal measure. Dawn was breaking cold and grey when I finally whispered, then we end this. Whatever it takes. His answer was fierce and final. Whatever it takes. The message arrived at dawn, delivered by a Providence courier who was immediately detained by Nikolai's security team. A single sheet of paper with an address and time, Old Providence Shipping Warehouse. 10 p.m. Come alone, or she dies screaming. Nikolai studied the note across the breakfast table, his expression carved from stone. It's a trap, Anton said from his wheelchair, still recovering but insisting on being present for the briefing. Marcus has no intention of negotiating. I know. Nikolai set the paper down with deliberate care. But it's also our best chance to end this on our terms. He expects me to come. He'll have his entire leadership there. A decapitation strike, if we plan it right. My coffee turned to ash in my mouth. You can't be seriously considering this. I'm not just considering it. I'm accepting. His eyes met mine, firm and unyielding. This is how it ends, Emma. Tonight. The next 12 hours passed in tense preparation. Nikolai's tactical team assembled in the basement operations center, reviewing building schematics and surveillance footage. The warehouse was a kill-box limited exits, clear sight lines for snipers, dozens of places for Providence soldiers to hide. You're wearing a wire, I insisted as Nikolai suited up in tactical gear that evening. And you're taking your entire team. The wire, yes. The team will maintain perimeter positions. He checked his sidearm with practiced efficiency. But I have to enter alone. If Marcus sees a force, he'll scatter, or kill you immediately. I grabbed his arm, fear making my voice sharp. Nikolai, please. There has to be another way. He turned to me, cupping my face with hands that had held weapons, and me with equal gentleness. This is the only way that doesn't leave you looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. His forehead pressed to mine. I need you to stay here with Dr. Ivanova. The estate is locked down. You'll be safe. I don't care about safe. My hands fisted in his tactical vest. I care about you coming back. Then trust that I will. He kissed me, soft and lingering and tasting like goodbye. I love you, Emma Sullivan. Whatever happens tonight, remember that. The words I'd been too afraid to say broke free. I love you too, so you better come back to me. He left without another word, and I was alone with the waiting. The operations center felt like a tomb, Doctor. Ivanova sat beside me, her hand gripping mine as we listened to the audio feed from Nikolai's wire. Anton coordinated the tactical team from his wheelchair, his face grim. He's entering now, Anton said quietly. Through the wire, I heard Nikolai's footsteps echoing in the warehouse. Then Marcus's voice, smooth, cultured, deadly. Nikolai Vulov, finally willing to face me like a man. Let's skip the pasturing, Marcus. You wanted a meeting. State your terms. Marcus laughed, the sound sending ice through my veins. Terms? You think I brought you here to negotiate? I brought you here to watch your empire crumble, starting with that nurse you've grown so attached to. My blood froze. If you've touched her, Nikolai's voice dropped to lethal quiet. Not yet, but I will. After I kill you, I'll take her, keep her, break her. And she'll spend every day knowing you died trying to save her. Malice dripped from every word. Just like you couldn't save your parents. Now? Nikolai said, and chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded through the speakers, shouting in Russian and English. The tactical team breaching the perimeter, Marcus screaming orders to his men. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only listen as the battle raged. Team 2 is pinned down, Anton barked into his radio. Send reinforcements. New voices crackled through the comes reinforcements from New York and Hartford. Allies Nikolai had called in secretly. The tide was turning. Through it all, I heard Nikolai's controlled breathing, his weapon firing in measured bursts. Then a different sound. Close. Personal. It ends here, Marcus. Nikolai's voice, deadly calm. You think killing me makes you better than me? Marcus snarled. You're still a monster, Nikolai. You'll always be. A single gunshot cut him off. Silence. Terrible, endless silence. Then Nikolai's voice, rough and exhausted, crackling through the radio. It's done. Marcus is dead. I'm coming home to her. I collapsed against Dr. Ivanova, relief and horror warring in my chest. Anton's eyes met mine across the operations center. It's over, Miss Sullivan. You're safe now. But as I waited for Nikolai to return, I wondered what price he'd paid to make it so, and whether the man who came back would still be the one I'd fallen in love with. Nikolai returned just after midnight, exhausted but unharmed. I met him in the foyer, and we collided in silence, his arms crushing me against him, my face buried in his neck, both of us shaking with relief and the weight of what had been done. It's over, he whispered against my hair. Marcus is dead. Providence is finished. I pulled back to search his face, finding exhaustion and something darker, the cost of violence, even justified violence. Blood spattered his jacket, though he assured me none of it was his. Are you okay? I asked, knowing the answer was more complicated than yes or no. I will be. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Now that I'm with you, the days that followed were a blur of activity. Providence dissolved, its remaining members either absorbed into Nikolai's organization or scattered. The warehouse attack made headlines. Gang war ends in bloodbath. But Nikolai's lawyers and carefully placed law enforcement contacts ensured his name stayed clear of the investigation. Marcus Salvatore was written off as a casualty of his own ambition. True to his word, Nikolai accelerated the legitimization of his empire. The gambling operations shut down within a week. Protection rackets were phased out. He poured resources into legal ventures, real estate development, import-export companies with proper licensing, venture capital investments in legitimate startups. It wasn't perfect. Some aspects of his world would always operate in grey areas. But it was better, cleaner, a future we could build on. 2 months after that night at the warehouse, I stood in the newly renovated clinic, watching the morning light stream through windows that had been replaced with bulletproof glass. The waiting room was full mothers with children, elderly immigrants needing checkups, workers injured on legitimate construction jobs Nikolai's company now provided. It's beautiful, Dr. Ivanova said beside me, surveying our expanded facility. What you and Mr. Vulov have built here. We're building it together, I corrected. All of us. The clinic had been transformed from a shadow operation into a proper community health center still serving Nikolai's people, but also anyone who needed care, documented or not. We'd hired 3 new nurses and a pediatrician, mental health services, even a small dental office. Something good rising from the ashes of violence. I felt Nikolai's presence before I saw him, that electric awareness that never faded. He entered through the front door like any other visitor, dressed in a charcoal suit rather than tactical gear, carrying 2 cups of coffee, "Morning, Dr. Ivanova," he said with a polite nod before turning to me. "Emma, can we talk?" We walked to the small courtyard garden behind the Clinica edition I'd requested, a place for patients to sit in sunlight and peace. Nikolai handed me my coffee, then took both my hands in his. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice carrying a nervousness I'd never heard before. No pressure, no assumptions. A real question that requires a real answer. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I want to build a life that's worthy of you," he continued, his dark eyes holding mine with devastating intensity. "One where we don't have to hide, where our children won't inherit my sins, where the worst thing they know about their father is that he works too much." A smile ghosted across his lips. "I want dinners without tactical discussions, vacations without security details, a future where violence is in the past, not lurking around every corner." He released one of my hands to pull a small velvet box from his pocket. "Emma Sullivan, will you help me build it? Will you marry me?" The ring was simpler, sapphire the color of midnight, surrounded by diamonds that caught the morning light. Beautiful and understated, like he knew exactly who I was. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Yes." His kiss was soft, reverent, tasting of coffee and hope and the future we'd fought so hard to claim. When we broke apart, I leaned into his side, both of us watching through the courtyard windows as families arrived for care, a mother carrying her toddler, an elderly man with his grandson, people building lives in the shadow of violence that we were working to transform into something better. "Do you think it's possible," I asked quietly, "to leave the past behind completely?" His arm tightened around me. "No, but I think it's possible to build a future that's stronger than the past." He pressed a kiss to my temple, "Especially with you beside me." Inside the clinic, Dr. Ivanova called my name. A patient needed me. I squeezed Nikolai's hand before heading back inside, the sapphire on my finger catching light, a promise made solid. Behind me, Nikolai stood in the courtyard garden, watching me work through the windows with something like wonder in his eyes. We'd survived the darkness, survived Marcus, survived the violence, survived the fear that love meant losing ourselves. Now we got to do the harder, better work, building something worth surviving for, together.